Hi, so this is our newest episode of the podcast, and this one was an idea that I came up with because it's been a long first couple of weeks back at work, and I wanted to do something fun over this weekend. So I thought what would be kind of fun would be if we both each came up with two arguments on our own to present to the other person blind, and we just had a regular episode. So that we're going to do. And since we both have extra ideas for ones we want to do, like we could take those extra ideas and just decide on a fifth one on the spot. That could be kind of fun too, just depending on how long these first four take and how we feel at the end of it. But yeah, we're going to do kind of our regular thing, except these are all blind arguments. We don't have a judge this week because this was so unprepared. I texted Friday, hey, do you want to do this weekend? And Ben said yes, so we didn't ask anybody if they wanted to come on and judge. So if I had planned this more, I would have done that, but whatever, it is what it is. Alright, so, my first argument, I was thinking about this because I've been playing a lot of Total War lately, just to have some fun with it, and I've been trying out Shogun 2, and I was thinking to myself, have I played enough Shogun 2 that I would consider Shogun 2 my favorite Total War game? And I thought, maybe when I get to about 100 hours in, my opinion might change, but right now, it's probably still Rome 2 or Napoleon. So, for this argument, I thought, what's the best Total War game? Because our two picks would probably be Rome 2 and Napoleon, depending on who picked which one. So, I think I picked Total War Rome 2 as the best Total War game, and here are a couple of reasons why. One, it has a very interesting and immersive campaign, and it's set up really well to you get really into what you're doing, and you have good control over your finances and your diplomacy and your grand war strategies. It's a really fun, good strategy game, and the campaigns are just long enough that you feel like you've really done something, and you've been really immersed in this campaign, but they're not so long that by the end of it you're just oh god, I don't want to do this anymore. It's not like a game Europa Universalis for Crusader Kings or something like that, where it could take 30 or 40 hours to complete a game. It's at the most, the hardest campaigns are going to take 10, and sometimes the hardest campaigns are the funnest ones to get through because you had to work the hardest to win. There's a lot of interesting unit variety. There's a lot of interesting factional variety where you could play as an infantry heavy faction like Rome. You could play as a cavalry heavy faction like Parthia or Armenia, or if you really want to go out on a limb, you could play as the complete cavalry factions of the Massagetei and the nomads like that. And there's just a lot of fun stuff you could do. The historical battles are all really interestingly well done and really hard. So just playing them even on the normal difficulty, they're very difficult, and you feel very satisfied when you win them. The battles themselves are pretty fun, and even though sometimes the infantry engagements are a little bit more static because you're just running one line into another line, where you do the interesting stuff with the maneuverability and the mobility of your skirmishers and your cavalry, those are where you win those battles, because the infantry battles in most situations are just going to be iron my line into your line, and we can either load our lines, try to fight it out, or I can try to win in all of these other sectors to bring all of this other stuff into the back of your infantry to help me win. There's just a lot of fun. There's a lot of really cool stuff you can do. There's a lot of cool unit variety, and I think on the whole, because of just how big and how immersive it is, Rome 2 is the best Total War game.
Okay. Well, yeah, I mean, if I'd been able to pick first, of course, I probably would have gone with Rome 2 as well, because I put the most hours into it, but I also really enjoy Napoleon. But just because this is such a bullshit podcast, I'm going to say Shogun 2 for my argument, just to see what happens. So,
I like it.
I played only about 20 or so hours of Shogun 2, but what I had played, it is a really impressive game. It's just absolutely gorgeous. The campaign map, the battles, the detail, and the units and the ships and the naval battles and stuff like that is just so great that even if you're getting your ass kicked, you're having a great time just because you're like, this world is so beautifully and detailed the way it's realized on screen, and there's so much care put into the representation of the Japanese units and the way that the culture of these different factions would have worked in that time period. And then also, like, I'd say, you're probably learning more too, because like in America, like our history education is so focused on the West, so we hear all about Rome and we hear all about France and stuff, and we don't learn a damn thing about Japan. And so like the amount of learning you're doing watching this game is a great benefit. And then also, just like you said, sometimes the hardest campaigns are the most satisfying ones because you really had to work your ass off to win. Now, I've never actually won a Shogun campaign because I've only played like 3 of them, and I got my ass kicked each time because I didn't know what I was doing, because that was before I'd put 1,000 hours into Rome 2. So, but like I am looking forward to getting back into it, because it's like now this is kind of the pinnacle of achievement, because it is a really hard game, but like when you put that much effort into something, it is quite an accomplishment to win those campaigns, and just the amount of detail and just how great the game looks while you're doing it makes it a delight.
I think the only thing that holds Shogun 2 back against Rome 2 is Shogun 2, if you are really, really into Total War and you know what you're doing, like you said, after 800 plus hours in Napoleon and 1,000 plus hours in Rome, and for me, like almost 500 hours in Napoleon and almost 800 hours in Rome, only after all of that could I go into Shogun 2 with some idea of what I was doing and be able to adapt to what the game was. Whereas like Rome 2 or Napoleon or Rome 2 or Empire, something like that, are so much more beginner friendly, and I think that is something that like puts Rome 2 just a little bit higher. I think like on their merits, they're very similar in that they're both really beautiful. They're really, really immersive campaign maps. You're learning a lot while you're playing, because yes, we learn a lot about like Rome and Greece and stuff like that, but we don't hear anything about like the successor kingdom. So you learn a lot about like the Seleucids, the Bactrians, more about Macedon than just Alexander the Great. Some of the great battles of the ancient world that even when you're learning about like the government of Rome, which is important in America because the American Republic is based a lot on the Roman Republic. There's still a lot of cool stuff about ancient history that you just don't learn growing up that you learn about from playing the game. But I do like that point of we at least learn a little bit about Rome, whereas we hear nothing about Japan or China or anything in Asia before World War II. And what we do is that the Japanese were the enemy, not that the Japanese had like 1,300 years of a really, really interesting culture before that, but it doesn't matter because for like this 60-year period we hated them.
Yeah, well, I don't know how much more I can add. I just thought it'd be fun to make that argument. I will say that like the first time because we went and bought Total War, and I think we bought like Shogun 2 and Empire or something like that. And so
Empire,
yeah, so Shogun 2 was the first.
We were stupid and we didn't realize we could use both discs like we had for Civ.
Yeah, but anyway, so yeah, Shogun 2, like the first campaign I played on there, like I don't think I ever I played as whatever the faction is in the very far north of Japan. I don't think I ever conquered more than 4 territories, but I played the entire campaign through anyway because it was a lot of fun. But then after that, I was like, okay, I'm getting stopped like right at the beginning of each of these campaigns and don't know what I'm doing, so then I didn't come back to it. But my example of kind of giving up is probably not the best one to take. So I'm looking forward to getting back into it sometime when I have the time to do so.
Yeah, and the reason I picked Rome 2 instead of Napoleon, because I thought you were going to pick Napoleon. I thought about just restricting it to Rome 2 versus Napoleon, because I also thought you might do some ridiculous bullshit and pick Shogun 2, but I thought that preparing, it was a lot easier to criticize Rome 2 than it is Napoleon, because Rome 2 has a lot of criticisms, like, it's still $60, the DLC is like $130, and all of these other things that Napoleon doesn't really have anymore, because since they released the Napoleon Definitive Edition, you get the game and all of the DLC for like $40.
Yeah, well, I don't really mind that as much. And the thing about Napoleon is you've got some stuff like just how terrible the AI are, and the fact that you can't play nearly as many different campaigns as you can on Rome.
Yeah, that's true. And, you know, you have a little bit of the same thing in Shogun 2, where the AI is a lot better. It's definitely the best AI of the three, like, where if they are supposed to be defending, they will actually, like, defend, whereas on the other ones, it doesn't matter. They're gonna Sovietly march at you anyway. But the attacking AI is still pretty stupid. Like, they will just march straight at you. They'll try to flank you a little bit, but it's still pretty easy to beat them. But the defending AI they are pretty hard.
Yeah.
So the AI is better, but the AI still isn't great. Okay. Well, yeah. That was pretty fun anyway.
All right. Okay, so I guess I should go for my well, so I have two different topics. One's related to sports and one's related to politics. Which one would you like to do first?
Let's do the politics one.
Okay, so my question, and we have two different ways we can go at this. So either who should be the 2020 Democratic nominee of the people who either are running or are likely to run, or who would be your dream pick of people who either can't or probably won't run. So either way, we could go with that.
Yeah, let's go with dream picks. I think mine would be the same regardless, unless you take them.
Okay, so
go ahead.
So my serious pick of like someone who's actually running at this point would probably be Kamala Harris, but my pick of someone who can't run but who would be really fun to watch go against Trump, and I'm basing this not on like how this person would do as president, but how this person would do in the campaign, is Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, because she's going to be too young to run in 2020, and I'm not even sure if she'll be like right on the borderline in 2024. But it doesn't matter because Trump won't have convinced Congress to give him a lifetime appointment to president by that point anyway, so he won't be running. But anyway, so my reason for picking Alexandria yeah, well, no. So, yeah, my reason for picking Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is because I think she's like the one person like who's in politics right now who's really shown that like she can create controversy and take criticism and then just dish it back better than what she got, so that you know, like, and you know, she's great on Twitter, you know, so that's like something that can lead, you know, we've seen just how Trump has taken Twitter and turned it from something that could be a liability to like a huge asset for him, and I think she understands how to do that as well. And you know, she's just got great wit and just a really good idea to good way of taking her points and just putting them in just these sharp, clear messages. And so I think it would be really fun to watch Trump go against someone who could just dish it right back at him, and who you know, could sustain getting a bunch of criticism and come out the stronger for it, like Trump does on the right. She can do that on the left, and so I just think that'd be really fun to see. And then also I'd say like it would be like such a giant contrast to have old orangish white man versus young woman of color, because that's really where the where the energy in the Democratic Party is right now, is with young women of color. So I think overall that would be my dream pick for maybe not the best president for 2020, but the best Democratic candidate to make the most entertaining campaign.
I like those points. That's very well thought out. My dream pick, and who I think will probably get in the race, is just give me the Beto, because the Beto does some things that are very important. One, young people like him and young people rally to him, which is very important because that is basically how Obama won in 2008 and 2012. If he can almost win in Texas, he could probably win nationwide. He's young, he's interesting, and he's charismatic. Like, he is everything that we need of just the kind of guy that all of the different factions that need to come together and vote Democratic in large numbers for Democrats to win will vote for somebody like that. So I think he is. I don't know if he would make the best president, but I like his chances to win. If he can do what he did in Texas, I think he can do that nationwide.
Well, yeah, I think Beto O'Rourke is one of the more intriguing candidates out there, and yeah, I think there is a decent chance that he'll throw his hat in the ring at some point. And with both of our picks, like, I think, you know, I think Beto's had maybe 3 terms as a representative, and then Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is, of course, brand new as a representative, so they don't have much of a track record, which, as we saw with Obama, is not, or Trump, is not that big an obstacle these days. So there's not much I can
no obstacle at all anymore.
Criticize on their record. But what I'll say about Beto is, like, I think he is very charismatic. I think his rhetoric, though, to me, strikes me as guy who was really good in high school forensics, who can rally people who don't know any better to be like, oh wow, this guy's really inspiring because he talks with the right cadence and speaks the right platitudes, but there's not a lot underneath what he says. And I don't know, I haven't heard as much from Ocasio-Cortez because she's a little newer on the scene, so I don't, but I think her style of speaking is a little more pointed maybe. But I think the thing about Beto is when Trump goes low, Beto will go high, and that will work for a while. But Trump goes so low and so dirty that eventually he's just going to wear Beto down and make him look weak, and there's just going to be nothing he can do to respond to it. Whereas Ocasio-Cortez, she will get down in the trenches, and it'll be blow for blow. It'll be a vicious dogfight of a campaign, and Trump will be I don't know, I'm just doing all the things that work against everyone else, and it's just not working against her because she's dishing it right back. Neither of us is really pulling ahead, but it's just constant, every time I dominate the news cycle with something ridiculous I said, then she'll come back with, some thing that's just totally, rallies the news cycle around her. And so I think that, it really, if you're running an unexperienced candidate against Trump, you need someone who can bring that fight and that ability to just grab the opponent by the throat.
Okay, well, the good cadence and the empty platitudes and those kind of candidates win, though. That's the sad thing, is you don't have to actually say things that are going to help people or make people's lives any better. You just have to make them feel good. And Beto is the kind of candidate that would make people feel good. And with Hillary, I don't think it was necessarily just how much Trump wore her down. it was that she already had so much other baggage that eventually, with Trump wearing her down, wasn't necessarily as much of a reason people didn't vote for her as all of her other baggage was. And I don't think personally for politics in the country, having someone like Ocasio-Cortez who would just get down and sling the mud with Trump would be good for us right now. That would actually make it worse. I don't know if there's any way we can make it any better, and yes, that would be entertaining, but we don't need entertaining. We need some kind of return to normalcy, and we would not get that with Ocasio-Cortez against Trump.
Well, that's true, but like, yeah, if we were arguing who would be the best nominee, of serious candidates, I would have a very much different angle about this. But you know, this is my dream pick argument, so that's what I'm going for is maximum entertainment value of the campaign, and while still having a shot to win. Like, obviously, you know, Ocasio-Cortez can't run, and I think she definitely does need a lot more experience and to temper herself more before she's actually someone who would be a good president. But I just think that, you know, the thing is, like, both Beto O'Rourke and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez would really rally the Democrats to their side. And they'd bring them out in greater numbers than Hillary, but I still don't know for sure whether that would be enough to overcome just how much the Trump's base still supports him, and the fact that you know, that he well, I don't know. I mean, he's still got so much support among his base, and I just think both of them really don't have that any chance to really pull people away from Trump's base to them. It would just be more like, could they energize enough liberal voters to win? I think either of them could, but I don't know. For me, it's like, it's way too early to know who I'm going to vote for in 2020. It really depends. You know, I'm going to have to do a lot of studying of their policies in the race. So at this point, it's just like, well, I want to see something. I just want to see something crazy and entertaining. I know that's stupid. I know that's destructive, but God, it'd be fun.
I mean, at this point, we've already thrown enough Christians to the lands. What's a couple more? And one final side thing I will say that why I think Trump versus Ocasio-Cortez would be bad is that one of the most destructive things that Trump bubbled out of the fabric of America during the 2016 campaign was just how racist and sexist we still are. So having Trump run against another female in 2020, that would be ugly, and I don't want to see that again. Like, there are a lot of very, very qualified women who deserve to be president at someday, but I don't want one of them to have to run against Trump, because he can mobilize all that is worst about the country in a very uniquely terrifying way. And when you're trying to beat Trump, you're not trying to pull from his base, because you're not going to pull from his base. You just have to get the independents who saw him as the better of two bad options. So there is no way to pull from his base. You have to energize all of the young liberals and pull in the independents who voted for him.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, I think I'm gonna give you credit in this argument, because I think your point about just how, like, we need someone who isn't gonna make things more destructive than they already are, and the fact that Trump's gonna be doing that on his own anyway. Like, you know, I think you're right that Beto would be better for the country as a candidate, even if I don't think either of them is ready to be president yet. He's certainly closer. But I just thought it'd be fun fun to argue for Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez because it's a great hypothetical. It's just it would be terrible.
Yeah, because she is the perfect kind of candidate to run against Trump if you want someone who is going to take it back to Trump. And we needed that in 2016. I don't think we need that now. Mm-hmm. I think we're so far gone now that would just make it worse. Whereas if we would have had that in 2016, maybe we could have stopped this before it happened.
Yeah, because it would have been like just kind of cauterizing the wound with a bit of fire then, whereas now it's like we've already bled out and now we're just burning a corpse.
Pretty much. Okay. So I have, that was a good one. My two options were either the best faction in Total War or the best blues guitar solo.
Okay.
I will let you choose which one you want.
Well, I mean, the best blues guitar solo is like more interesting to me. But yeah, I mean, they both could be pretty good. I don't know.
Okay. Or I was also thinking best blues song that is not a cover, like best original blues song.
Uh-huh.
So okay, let's go for I was trying to think if I did best faction in Total War, what would you pick? Well, I'm probably going to do best faction in Total War because it would be as interesting as the two blues ones would be to listen to you argue that just off the cuff. I won't have that much to say.
Mm-hmm.
So it might not be that interesting otherwise, but fuck it. Let's just do the best blues song that isn't a cover, and then we can come back to best faction in Total War. Because my pick for best faction in Total War is France from Napoleon. So you can think about that for a little bit. But okay. So best blues song that is not a cover. So this will just give me a chance to fawn all over Soul Station some more. My pick is Soul Station by Joanne Shaw Taylor, and I think that is the best blues song that is not a cover because it has everything you want in a really good blues song of like it's really melodic, it has really good guitar, but what takes it over the top for some of the other ones for me is that it also has really good lyrics and has a really interesting message. So it has all of the stuff that you're gonna get in pretty much every like pretty good blues song, plus really interesting lyrics and a really interesting message, which is what takes it over the top for me. Plus, it has what I think is her best solo. That solo at the end of the song is incredible.
Okay, well, all the things you said about Soul Station could also be said about my pick, which is "Couldn't Stand the Weather" by Stevie Ray Vaughan. It's got an absolutely great intro and riff, and well, actually two great riffs in that song. The big, strong, slow riff at the intro, and then the much faster, more intricate riff deeper into the song. Has really good lyrics, and then just a fantastic guitar solo. And I think, it's Stevie Ray Vaughan's best songwriting effort, and of course he's one of the all-time great blues musicians. And I'd say, like, for me, like, what puts Couldn't Stand the Weather above Soul Station is that there's the original version is awesome, but then also, like, the live versions also have translated really, really well, and the version at Montreux in 1985 is one of my all-time favorites. And the way the riff opens up the song is so powerful, and he's been able to adapt it in several different sounds depending on the live performance. I've seen several. I think one thing that holds Soul Station back just a little bit for me is that Joanne Shaw Taylor is like, she's still pretty darn good live, but not as good live as Stevie Ray Vaughan. And so like the one version that we've heard like on Songs from the Road, it's like it's pretty good, but that isn't the best recording to begin with. And also I think like in a lot of her other live performances, like I've seen she's touring with a 3-piece band and she's missing the keyboards that are so important to that song. So like there hasn't been like a definitive live version of Soul Station the way there has been of Couldn't Stand the Weather. As far as the actual substance of the original recordings, like it's really hard to argue one of them being better than the other, because they're both really, really good. I'd say just the guitar work on both is fantastic. I think just with Steve Ray Vaughan's, it's just throughout the entire song there isn't like a single moment where you're not riveted by the guitar, whereas there are some parts in Soul Station, aside from like the intro and the solo, where it's maybe not quite as much that way, where it kind of like it's a little harder to pick apart what the individual instruments are doing. Both artists have a little bit of a problem with sometimes their lyrics being hard to hear exactly what they're saying, so I can't really knock that for Joanne Shaw Taylor when Stevie Ray Vaughan does the same. So yeah, it's hard to knock Soul Station because it's great, but in my opinion, Couldn't Stand the Weather is the top one.
The only thing I will say, which I knew I was going to get creamed on this, but I just wanted, I thought you having to argue this just off the cuff could be one of your better podcast moments, so I just had to go for it. What Soul Station has that Couldn't Stand the Weather doesn't necessarily have for me is that every new time I listen to Soul Station, there is so much going on in that song that I've listened to it like 70 times now. If you look at my iTunes plays, I hear something new that I had not quite heard before, or I hear something in a new way that makes me like the song even more. And I don't necessarily have that experience with Couldn't Stand the Weather, because after about the 10th or 12th play, it's like, okay, I know every single thing that's going on, and I really enjoy this song every time I listen to it, and I know when everything's gonna hit, and you have that same feeling the first time you listen to it, every other time you listen to it, but I don't ever discover anything new anymore the way I still do with Soul Station.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, and yeah, I think that is like definitely one of the things that separates a truly great song, for me, and I think for both the studio and the studio versions of Couldn't Stand the Weather and Soul Station, like I wouldn't say like I have that every time, but I still have that sometimes when I listen to those songs. But yeah, I mean, with the fact that with the live version of Couldn't Stand the Weather, I'd say I still do have that somewhat. Yeah, I'd say for both those songs, for the studio versions, it's like I don't have that every time, but I definitely have that sometimes, and that's one of the reasons that both Stevie Ray Vaughan and Joanne Shaw Taylor are among my favorite artists, because they're like, you can do that with so many of their songs.
Yeah. Okay. So what was your sports-related one?
Okay, so it's Breakout, star of the 2019 fantasy baseball season, and so the two different angles on this are, one, just breakout star in general, could be anybody, or breakout star that no one saw coming, which would be like someone who's like around the 200th pick or later in the draft, who like isn't like highly hyped for next season. So we could go either way with that.
I could just say you could just do it generally, who's going to be the breakout star of fantasy.
Okay. So yeah, I have two picks that I think I could argue equally well for, so I'll let you pick just in case it's one of those two, like that I don't take yours when I have another one I could argue pretty well.
I'm gonna have to think about this for a minute because I really have not thought about baseball at all since the end of the season, so I'm not even sure who I would argue for this. God, who would I even pick for this? That is tough. Okay, you can just go ahead and then I'll think for a little while, see if anybody comes to mind.
Okay. So I have two, like I said, that I could go for. The more obvious choice, who I could argue really well for, is Vlad Guerrero Jr., but since I'm a Royals fan, I've got to go with Adalberto Mondesi, because I think he is poised for a really big fantasy season based on what he did at the end of last year and the fact that he's really young, and he's going to be on a team that is going to steal so many bases next year. I mean, the Royals have Whit Merrifield, Adalberto Mondesi, and Billy Hamilton. Like, it'll be, shocking if those guys don't combine for more than 120 stolen bases next year, and could go for like 150 even though that may be a slight stretch. But yeah, if you look at Mondesi's numbers from like the second half of the year, it looks like something that you'd see like from Trey Turner or one of the guys who maybe not quite like Mookie Betts or Francisco Lindor, but it's definitely someone who can hit 20 plus homers and steal like 40 plus bases, and he's going to be on a terrible team next year in the Royals, so he's probably not going to get a lot of RBI opportunities, although Whit Merrifield will be on the bases like quite a bit before the trade deadline, and then he'll get a bunch of chances to get into scoring position with all the bases he's going to steal, and with just how rough it is finding good base stealers these days. Like, I think that's going to be at a real premium this year, and I think he's the kind of guy who can get hits in a lot of different ways, so his batting average is probably going to be at least decent, if not great. It'll probably be like in the 270, 280 range maybe, and so you're looking at a guy who can get you a ton of value, who's probably going to go somewhere around like 110, 120 in the draft, and could potentially put up a season that would look a lot like what you might get from Trey Turner.
Okay, so I'm looking through the fantasy baseball rankings and early season rankings because I had just no idea who to pick for this, and I'm going to pick a guy who has been around for a while, but when I look at where he is ranked in the fantasy baseball rankings, he's ranked 160th, and he plays a position in second base that there aren't really a lot of mega elite second basemen in fantasy baseball, and he just got traded to the Yankees, or he got traded or signed by the Yankees, I can't remember. I think DJ LeMahieu is going to have a really, really breakout fantasy baseball this season this year, because here are his numbers from last year. And these aren't bad for second base, playing for the Rockies. 276, 15 home runs, 32 doubles, 147 hits, and 62 RBI. So, if you put with DJ LeMahieu in that ridiculous Yankees offense, like, I think it's not out of the realm of possibility to think that he could hit like 25 home runs and drive in close to 100 runs and score close to 100 runs, and he's ranked like 160. So if you could get that at that position and at that draft value, that is pretty incredible. Now, there's a lot of there's a lot of hyperbole there, and he has been around for a while, so there's no guarantee he's going to take this leap, but nobody saw Didi Gregorius coming either of the last two seasons, and he took the lead playing in that ridiculous Yankees offense. So there is precedent for light-hitting middle infielder to go crazy once he's surrounded by all of that ridiculous Yankees bullshit.
Yeah, that is true. And actually, if we'd done the other version where it was like someone who's ranked 200 or lower, my pick would have been Luke Voigt, their their first baseman, because I think he's like an obvious pick to kick a lot of ass, and it will probably be ranked like 40 or 50 spots higher by the end of fantasy drafts. But yeah, I think DJ LeMahieu is an interesting pick. I didn't realize he was ranked that low. That is way too low for him to be, because he's a guy who has contended for a batting title in Coors. He might have even won one once. I can't remember, but he's the kind of guy who can hit over 300, and yeah, you put that in Yankee Stadium with the Yankees lineup. That's pretty good. I think while it is possible that he'll see an upswing in his RBI and home runs, it's kind of hard to say, because like I don't think it'd probably be that big a difference, because if you're playing in Coors Field, like you're maybe not going to hit as many home runs as you would in Yankee Stadium, but it's still going to be quite a bit, and then your RBI potential is like already really high based on the way the Rockies score runs and the way how expansive that outfield is. So I don't think that's probably going to change too much. Like, yeah, you might be a little farther down on the lineup, but also like it's going to be kind of weird seeing what happens there, because they've got Gleyber Torres also kind of competing for time in there. It sounds like they may be kind of making some sort of thing where LeMahieu and Torres are kind of moving around a bit here and there, and not always playing the same spot, so that could get a little weird. And then I think, yeah, it's like LeMahieu has been around quite a while, so it's kind of hard to project that much of an upswing, and there's just so many various factors. I think where Mondesi, like what I really like from him is, like, I think the stolen bases is going to be such a huge emphasis for the Royals next year. Like everything indicates that's going to happen, and he's shown he can do it. So that is more dependent on something that's fully within Mondesi's control, rather than, well, how do the Yankees play LeMahieu and how does he respond to being in that lineup? And then I think, Mondesi has the talent to get a lot of hits, get on base a lot, and is showing that he can add a bit of pop to go with those stolen bases. Whereas like LeMahieu's stolen base numbers have been going quite a bit down recently, so he's the kind of guy where it's like he's useful for the batting average and the runs scored, but is he really going to provide you that power? I don't know.
Well, with LeMahieu, yes, playing half of his games, and this is about all I have to say, because I, again, have not thought about baseball even at all since the end of the season. But with LeMahieu, not only is he playing half of his games in Yankee Stadium, he's playing like 3/4 of his games in very, very hitter-friendly AL East parks. So it's not only that he's going to the most hitter-friendly park outside of Coors in the majors, he's then playing like 20 games at Fenway, or 10 games at Fenway, 10 games in Camden Yards, 10 games in the Skydome. Like, the AL East is just a hitter's paradise, and there is precedent for seeing guys go to the AL East and all of a sudden seeing their numbers surge. So I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility to think that he could hit 20 home runs, but he is kind of later in his career, and where the boon would be is hopefully you would get more RBIs with him later in the lineup and maybe have him flash a little bit more power. The Yankees aren't necessarily going to care about stolen bases, but the thing with stolen bases in fantasy is they are so rare to come by anymore. If you can get a guy who could consistently steal you like 30 or more, that would be huge. And if Mondesi can do that and give you production in other categories, then that's a gold mine, because the guys who give you steals now are guys that just are shit at everything else, like Billy Hamilton. So if you get a guy like Mondesi who can give you those steals and be good at a bunch of the other categories, like a Whit Merrifield or a Trey Turner is, and you can draft him that low, Yeah, I will concede that you have won, but I think it is within the realm of possibility to see DJ LeMahieu become like a top 2 fantasy baseball second baseman in that ridiculous Yankees lineup if he has a good enough start to the season that the Yankees just decide, well, this guy's got to be in the lineup.
Yeah.
Which could happen.
Yeah, and I think LeMahieu is the kind of guy where if he's going that low, you definitely want to take the chance on him, because with how good his batting average has been in the past, like you know,
with just how thin second base is.
Yeah, it's like you got to take the chance on him. So I'd be surprised if, like, I think right now, like, Mondesi's projected to go, well, based on the rankings they came out with, like, right at the end of the season, I think Mondesi is projected to go around 130. I think he'll probably jump up to 110 or higher, and LeMahieu will probably jump up to, like, 120 or 130 if it looks like he's has any shot at regular playing time at second base, and if he's guaranteed to be the starter, it might even be higher than that. So, I mean, it should be.
Yeah, because I know Didi's supposed to be out for about the first half of the season, so I wouldn't be surprised if they ran Torres at short and LeMahieu at second.
Yeah, that'll probably happen.
Okay, well, this has been a pretty short episode so far. Do you want to finish with the best faction in Total War?
Sure.
Okay, and did you have any more that you were thinking about that you wanted to throw out? Because we're like under 50 minutes.
I mean, yeah, I'd only thought of those two, so.
Okay, so the best faction in Total War, and this is of the Total Wars we've played a lot, and I assumed you'd pick something from Napoleon or Rome, because you haven't quite played enough Shogun 2 to know. But if I was picking one from Shogun 2, I'd definitely pick the Oda, because you can just spam out tons of Yari Ashigaru and like Bo Ashigaru, and the Oda have like their thing for the campaign is that their Yari Ashigaru is cheaper. All their Ashigaru were cheaper, and they're a little bit better than other Ashigaru, so you can just spam like 3,000 plus man armies and just conquer the map in like 50 turns. I played the short campaign. I meant to play the long campaign. Played the short campaign. Won in an hour and only in like 50 turns with nothing but just Ashigaru armies. And the thing is, like, you just outnumber people so badly that you can win everything on auto resolve. If you get stuck to where you actually have to fight a battle, you're screwed. But if you can, but your armies are so big, you can just auto-resolve everything, and if you have to fight a battle, you can just use Yari Wall and see what happens. But the best faction in Total War game is France from Napoleon Total War, which makes sense because Napoleon was a French emperor, so it makes sense for France to be a very strong faction. But why I think France is the strongest faction in a Total War game, specifically the ones that we've played a lot, because there are probably better picks in like Attila or Medieval 2 or something like that. France has no weaknesses, and France is so well-rounded that it has no weaknesses, because with a lot of the other factions, it's either they have like their thing that they're good at, and then they have like a really glaring weakness. France doesn't really have one of those. Their infantry is really good. They have a lot of interesting like special units that you can get into your army that you can only get as French, which makes sense because the game is based around the French, so it makes sense they would have the most unique units. Their cavalry is really good. They have like a good array of artillery. What they have going for them, like I said, is they don't have a single discernible weakness, which a lot of the other factions and a lot of the other games have something that you can point at and say, yeah, they're not good at that. France doesn't have one of those. Like the Chasseurs à Cheval will beat almost all other cav in Napoleon if you let him shoot a volley and then charge him into melee. Like they are unstoppable, and they are France's cheapest cav. So France from Napoleon is the best Total War faction.
Okay, well, unsurprisingly, since you picked France from Napoleon, I will pick Rome from Rome too. Also the.
I thought you might do that.
Yeah. Also, the faction that this particular game is based on, and so yeah, they get the cool stuff. So yeah, the things Rome has going for it, its infantry are just really good and like surprisingly affordable. So like you can get infantry. They have pretty good spear infantry, not as many options, but they have like just great sword units and a ton of them, whereas like most other factions in the game, their sword units are like they have one really good elite unit and one pretty decent but not amazing unit that's kind of expensive, and that's about it. Whereas Rome just has units of really good sword infantry, and for really affordable prices, so you can just mow down your opponents with this stuff that can just tank through an opposing army. They do have a few minor setbacks in some other areas, like their cav is not great, but it's like it's pretty good. And then like I said, not as many different spear units, but like Triarii are still like a really good spear unit. And then it is like a little bit annoying that you have to bring like a legatus or equivalent unit as your general, but like since Rome has disciplined, that is a huge advantage. So even if your general dies, it's not going to affect the morale of the rest of your units, and that advantage can't be overstated either. I'd say like with France and Napoleon, like yeah, they are the best army in that game. I'd just say like I think Rome is so much above like all the rest of the armies in Rome too. Like even though there's a lot of other factions that are really good, they're just like Rome is just built to be the best. I think France, like the big advantage France has is their cavalry, and then also like some of their elite infantry units. But also like a lot of the time, like it's kind of hard to get to the point in a campaign or to have the budget in a multiplayer battle to really bring a lot of those units, and their like regular line unit is not, it's just kind of on par with the average from the other factions. And then also like even though they have some pretty cool elite artillery units, like they're pretty expensive, and the lower tier ones aren't anything that amazing. So it's like, yeah, you have the advantage because your cav is good, but cav in Napoleon just kind of sucks in general. So it's just like, oh well, you have an advantage because your cav like won't die instantly, but it still won't do a ton. Whereas like in Rome, your cav can last a lot longer and not get tired nearly as soon. So it's worth a little more. But then also just like having those really elite sword units and being able to get them so cheap just sets your army up at such an advantage over all the opponents.
I would say with Rome, what holds Rome back a little bit are some of the weaknesses. Like they don't really have that good of skirmishers because they don't have any archers, which is a big problem because you can do a lot of damage to Rome with units like elephants and like chariots that you kind of need archers to take down that Rome just does not have. Yes, the Roman infantry, especially like the Avocati cohort and some more stuff like that, is very good, but it's not unbeatable. But how you have to beat that stuff, the weakness that Rome has is that their cavalry is not very good, and that their skirmishers aren't very good, and that if their infantry cannot win the infantry fight fast enough, and the other person can use their superior cavalry and skirmishers to beat the Roman cavalry and the skirmishers, and then can bring all of that other stuff to bear against the Roman infantry, it's not necessarily totally unbeatable, and those weaknesses can be pretty glaring sometimes if you're playing somebody who really knows what they're doing. Whereas with France, like, yes, their Fusilier, the line unit, is kind of on par with the units of with the just standard line unit of all the other factions, but like their elite infantry, even though you can't bring that much of it, like that stuff in the right position can really, really carry a battle. Their cav is just so much better than every other cav that anybody else has. The fact that your Shashers Ashaval are one of the best units in the game, and they're only 700, and they can beat almost any other cav in almost any kind of engagement, like that is pretty overpowering. And yes, all the artillery in Napoleon is kind of hard to use, but French artillery is very good, and you have a good variety of it, even though the artillery is kind of hard to use if you don't know what you're doing. Again, I think it just comes down to when I look at France, I look at every portion of my army and say, okay, whatever I want to bring, I can definitely bring that, and I know I'm going to be in good shape, and I know I'm not going to think like, well, I have to go after skirmishers first because mine suck, or I have to make sure I bring extra spears to deal with this cav because my cav can't beat his straight up. It's each part of my army can fend for itself, whereas with Rome, you have, because of the couple of weaknesses that it has, you have to kind of like shift the composition of your army to compensate for them that you don't have to do with France.
Yeah, well, although I think that almost speaks more to the fact that battles in Rome are just a lot more, you have to put a lot more thought into them in general than battles in Napoleon, because in Napoleon it's basically just you kind of line up and hope that you have a better angle to shoot the other person from, whereas in Rome, like, you have to manage things a lot more closely because there's so many moving parts and all your pieces are directly clashing with each other in melee. I think, yeah, and with Rome, I guess, you know, it can, depending on your budget constraints, like the problems with the missile units could be a little bit of an issue, but not really that bad, because, like, yeah, archers are better than slingers, but slingers can still, you know, do pretty well against a lot of things. And then also, like, if you don't have the budget constraints, they have really good auxiliary units, and of course you can always throw in some stuff from other sources. But yeah, I think so. I think you can still do pretty well on that, and just the fact that your line can hold out for so long just gives you a lot more leeway to focus on the other parts of the battle that you might need to. I think with France, like, you don't go into every battle thinking, like, because I think with Rome, what really sets it apart is you go into every battle thinking, like, Rome should win this battle, whereas, like, in Napoleon, like, you're like, okay, yeah, France is probably a bit better, but, like, it still mostly just depends on, like, who gets the better angle on the other person in the line fight, and who doesn't piss their cavalry away first. And it's like, yeah, France is less likely to piss their cavalry away first because it sucks slightly less, but there's still only so much you can do with cav in Napoleon, so it's still kind of luck of the draw. It's just like you're in a little better shape with France.
I forgot that Rome actually did have archers. I forgot about the auxiliary Syrians. Like, in the campaign, they don't have archers, which is a really annoying issue, which is why I play with a unit mod that gives Rome archers, because not having archers can be pretty frustrating when you're running up against a lot of random barbarian factions. And yes, the Roman units do have discipline, which is very important, so you can just kind of piss your general away and it doesn't matter. But I know there's like something good to say this here, but it's just not quite coming to mind right now because I'm tired, which sucks. I'll probably think of this in like 2 hours and be like, that was what I needed to say to win, but I just couldn't think of it at the time. I think if I would have gone with the Oda, though, it would have been pretty hard. Like, that'd be a little bit easier one to argue for, just because, like, it doesn't matter if they have any weaknesses. You can win the campaign so quickly with just all of the dumb units you can just spam out. It doesn't matter. Like, oh, I have this. I'm never going to have to actually fight a battle because my armies have, like, 3,700 men in it, and the Oda Ashigaru is good enough that I'm always going to have good auto-resolve odds. So, just zip armies around the map and win the campaign in like an hour. It's really stupid.
Yeah, I'll have to give that a try sometime. Yeah, I mean that would, of course, it's like hard to know exactly. There might be some other arguments you could make against it if you had, since we don't have the experience of playing as all the different factions. But like, yeah, that does sound pretty good. I don't know.
Because my other pick for a Shogun faction would have been the Takeda, because the Takeda cav is just so much better than everybody else's cav, and the cav in Shogun 2 is really important because the cav is like, good cav is actually like good at just tanking infantry straight up if you have good cav, and the Takeda have the kind of cav that you can win a battle, you can win a defensive battle when you're outnumbered by like 800 because your Takeda Yari cav and your Takeda Katana cav will just wreck everything. It's really stupid.
Yeah.
But the Oda also started in a more favorable position, whereas the Takeda are in like a little bit harder position, and more things could go wrong for you right away than are going to go wrong for you with the Oda. I guess another thing is, if I was going to bring up one more thing about Rome versus France, is like, if you're playing a campaign as somebody who isn't one of them, it's a lot harder to deal with France in the Napoleon campaign than it is to deal with Rome during the Rome 2 grade campaign, because the AI is terrible at controlling Rome, and Rome just always dies really quickly and never does anything.
Yeah.
But I didn't really want to bring that to the argument.
Yeah, true, because that does have a lot to do with how the game is set up too. Because France gets like a really good position, whereas Rome gets kind of a shit position from the way that the AI are controlled. But yeah, I don't know. Like, I feel like that argument was actually really close, because I think both of us, like, our counter arguments were like, I like, your counter argument was like really strong, and so I was like, oh crap, I don't know, and then somehow I pulled out like a really good one too, so
yeah. I don't know what to judge which way that would have gone, but yeah, that was a fun one.
Yeah.
It's also thinking like best unique unit in Civ 4, because I have a good counter argument to the Praetorian, but I don't even know what could even come close to that for the second option.
Yeah.
It's like the good counter argument to the Praetorian is, if you don't have iron close to you, you're fucked.
Right.
But if you do, and you can just get Praetorians, you can win the game, and you can win the game by like 1380.
Yeah.
And no other early unique unit lets you do that.
Yeah.
And a lot of the other unique units, you get so late in the game, like, you might have one before you even get to them. The only other one that is even close is the Redcoat.
Mm-hmm.
But, like, it just doesn't have the possibilities that the Praetorian does. But I guess the argument for the Redcoat is that you're just going to have it regardless. You don't have the restriction of having to have the right resource.
Mm-hmm.
So that is something going in its favor, but just the Praetorians are just so dumb. If you get the iron, and you can just start jizzing Praetorians all over the map.
Yeah.
Okay, so that was fun. I finished Gatsby yesterday. I'm glad I went and gave that another shot, because on third attempt, finally making it all the way through it, I actually quite enjoyed it.
Yeah.
I liked that when you just step back and look at it, like, Nick Carraway kind of feels like the character who is what we think we are and the ideal of what we want to be, whereas everybody else, especially Gatsby, is kind of like the hard reality of what the world actually was.
Uh-huh.
And, like, all of those people are, like, Daisy and Tom and Gatsby are all irredeemably bad people, because that is, and irredeemably fake people, because that is just, that is where we were at in the 20s. And because we were still recovering from the catastrophe of World War I, that, like, after seeing just how destructive humans could be toward each other, humans went back to really primitive, like, who cares about morals and anybody else? Let's just do whatever we want all the time. A short life and a merry one.
Yeah. Yeah, and just like the imagery from like the depictions of like how they were living, and the mansions and the fancy neighborhoods, and the ridiculous social life they had. Like it's just really vivid imagery to portray all of that.
And also the craziness of like the cautionary tale of the American dream of like you can't just go into this thinking that if you actually have some success and you have what is considered success, that's actually going to get you what you want, when all of the success that Gatsby had was so that he could be with Daisy, and despite all of that, he still wasn't. And it didn't matter how successful he was never going to be happy without that.
Yeah.
And trying to get that got him killed.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'll probably go back to The Sun Also Rises at some point and give that a run with kind of the same thought of like, okay, these people are like representations of the time period, and be less annoyed by how much of irredeemable assholes they are. But I don't know, it'll be tough.
Yeah. Yeah, because I feel like, the two stories do have a lot of in common in that respect. Yeah, I think, with Gatsby, it's like, it took kind of seeing it as a, because, like, I also saw it as a play, and, like, that helped, like, cement a lot of the imagery in my mind, whereas, like, just from reading The Sun Also Rises, it's like, oh, I remember this was like really well written, and like all the just describing of what Spain was like at that time is really good, but like the characters and their actions like weren't quite as memorable to me as The Great Gatsby, but that might also just be because I didn't have like the secondary reinforcement of reading it and seeing it as a play.
Yeah. Okay, well, I would like to continue talking, but I also am going to make my lunch for tomorrow, so I'm going to hang up on